How often do you watch porn?
Hey, I'm Rob Nelson.
I'm Chanel Preston.
And this is Sex Thing.
The show that really makes you think.
All right, here we are. Hello. Hi, Chanel.
Hi, Rob.
That took a while, huh? Look, we've upgraded from our last.
Is it an upgrade or is it just...
We've upgraded. It's like our own mini studio from the garage.
It is our very own.
We're
You're right.
growing.
We're not competing with other podcasters.
We're growing. We have T-shirts that say Sex Thing.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We have
Nice,
T-shirts.
right?
We have a little banner that you guys can't see, but it's here.
Right.
And we're dressed in these nice
People
white
see the banner.
T-shirts.
Right?
We're
Our
pretty
Sex Thing
fancy.
at Sex Thing Show.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into it, right?
Yeah. So we don't have a guest today.
We have no guest today.
But that's okay because...
we don't need a guest today because of what we're talking about.
Right. We are
You
talking
the
about
guest.
something that I am the expert
That's right.
in.
Which means we decided to do a show about porn itself.
Yeah. There's a lot to talk about.
There's a lot, not just, that's funny. At first, you're like, let's talk about porn. Like in our first episode, let's talk about sex. Let's talk about porn. That's fun,
It is fun.
talking about porn.
I think it's going to be fun today.
You're the porn star,
Right?
so you're the expert on porn.
Yeah, I guess
And
so.
I'm a regular person
just a
who
regular old
uses
Rob.
porn.
You use porn.
I use porn.
All
I use
right.
porn
Well,
in my work.
All right. Well, before we get into it, let's talk a little bit about you then. Since you're a user of porn, I'm a creator of porn.
Right.
You're a user.
Yes.
And I think people want to know because people don't have this conversation
You're
a lot
right.
about like
No,
what
how-
kind of porn people like to
And
watch. So
by-
they want to know,
yeah.
similar to the fantasies episode, which we shot.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, is this normal? Am I okay? What does this mean that I like this? So Rob,
But before you ask your question, I think the other half of that is to have a conversation. Also, people don't get a conversation with somebody who makes porn.
that's
who
true.
does porn.
That's true.
So I've got questions for you after you ask my
Okay.
questions. And just before we start, everyone should know, we're going to look at all kinds of aspects about porn. Like what porn is, whether it's healthy, whether it's addictive, like the
Why
role it
people
play-
are saying it's a public health crisis, or
health
states are
crisis.
declaring it as a
and
public
how
health
we,
crisis.
again, we're going to dive deep into porn. We're going to have some fun with that, but we're going to reveal a little. Okay, go ahead. Now I was stalling to avoid the question.
Are you nervous?
I am a little. I don't know what you're going to ask me. Who wants
Okay.
to sit and be asked questions about porn from a porn star?
Well, now I'm nervous because I feel like they're supposed to be really good questions,
They
but they're
better,
probably not.
right?
I mean,
I'm
they're just
ready.
basic
Okay,
questions that I think
basic,
people
okay.
want to know. Like,
Okay, go for it.
You watch porn. You've already answered that question. How often do you watch porn?
Yeah, it depends. Sometimes I'd say a few times a week, probably.
Okay.
I mean, it's not like on a ritual schedule. I'm not like every single night I watch porn. I also would only watch porn probably I'm not like a day. I wouldn't like go home and watch porn in the middle of the day.
Okay.
Like it would
Is
be
that
like
is that bad? If
I don't know.
someone
In my
does?
head, it's bad. In my head, that feels somehow like you're sitting home watching porn. Like it's if you're watching like Netflix. I'm sure lots of people
like it's
do.
a nighttime thing.
Yeah, like it's a nighttime thing when it's dark
can't
like
jerk off during the
before you
day.
go to bed. It feels wrong. It feels wrong. I'd be like, what's wrong with me? I'm watching porn in the middle of the day. I'm an addict. I don't
Okay,
know.
so-
That's honest.
I mean,
I'm
that
sure
is
there's nothing
honest,
wrong with it. I'm sure there are a lot
and-
of people who do. And people probably like masturbate in the middle of the daytime with or without porn. But I probably wouldn't do that either. I mean, just by
Wait.
myself.
Okay. So
if I was just
you
home.
were in the middle of the day, you get home, you're like, okay, I really want to masturbate. Would you just not because you felt
Yeah,
it
probably.
was wrong, or would you just not feel like it because it was the middle of the day?
Probably both. Probably I wouldn't because middle of the day, but if I did, I'd probably think like there's like something.
You're like, I'm gonna wait till I get home.
To wait till it's
tonight,
night,
or I'm
till
gonna
it's
wait till
dark.
later.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's your favorite kind of porn?
By the way, is that a lot to watch? What do you
few
find in
times a
general?
week?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a set number. I mean, there's times I wouldn't watch it at all for
You know, I don't know
days.
the answer to that question.
I mean, do most people? Do you
I'm
think
not
most people watching this?
Shh. Watch yourself. Remember, I was going to say it before we were rolling, but I forgot. What are we going to remember, Rob?
I'm trying to learn to interrupt less
That's right. Be a better co-host
in my life. Yeah.
and in your life. I interrupt all the time in my regular life, and I try not to. But anyway, so now I lost my train of thought.
You were asking me. I was asking you how often.
Oh, okay.
What is a
Right.
normal amount to watch porn?
I don't know the answer to that, and I'm going to I'm gonna go out there and say I feel like men watch it more often than women.
Oh, I'm
Not
sure.
to say there aren't women that watch it regularly,
sure
but I
we
think
do.
men watch it more often.
We totally do.
And and I'm not a man, so I'm not really sure. I mean, men aren't just like coming up to me on the street all the time telling me how often they watch porn. So I don't know. I mean, if a guy said, I have to base it off the number that I would be shocked by.
Which
Like
would
if a
be
guy
what?
was like, I watch porn 150 times a week, I might be like, oh my,
That's a lot.
that is a lot.
I mean,
But
I think
if you what you're saying, you said a few times a week, that doesn't.
I
even
think
faze
look,
me.
men definitely watch porn more than women.
Yes.
Look, I've always said this. I think men are inherently more visual than women, and sometimes people
Absolutely.
argue about that. But it's like men talk about it all the time amongst ourselves. Like men constantly are, seeing everybody naked. Like you're kind of constantly taking people in that visual thing. And I know that women, sure they do it, but not like I think we get stimulated by visual. So it makes sense
Right.
that we would, porn would be a way for men to have a way to get aroused.
well,
It's same as if they went to a strip club and saw a naked woman or their girlfriend or whoever came in naked. It's a way, instead of just in your head, it's a way to see something that you then have a fantasy of.
I've said it before. I'll say it a million times probably, but porn to me is a visual representation of what's in our mind. And
That's
so
a great way to put it.
It sort of falls in line with that. Like guys like that visual representation.
Right.
But
Right, and people watching us right now, right? Like, think of the number of our audience.
right.
Not because they're perverts or anything, who are undressing you
Some of them are.
versus undressing me.
Right.
Very few undressing me.
But they are undressing me right now.
Right. They don't know what they're missing out on, but I'm just saying. I'm just kidding.
They can just.
I would
Google
rather
me.
not
It's-
people be
it's
undressing
not a
me
mystery
either.
what's under here. I'll say that.
But that doesn't matter to us. That's the whole point of the visual representation. It's not a mystery, but we still want to see. Well, yeah.
You love boobs.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're even with somebody you're intimate with, you know what they look like naked. Why do women wear lingerie and
You're just
take it off? It's
stimulated by the
you want to
visual.
see what's under it, even if you know.
Right.
So, how much porn do you watch?
I actually don't watch any porn.
You
now.
watch zero porn.
Yeah, well, 'cause-
zero.
Okay, this is the extent of my porn watching. I used to watch more porn before I was in porn. I can't say I watched it often. I couldn't even tell you how often I did watch it or not often I watched it. I don't remember. But anyway, now the extent of my porn watching is I'll be kind of like just perusing Twitter and I come across gay porn stars and I'm like, and I just start
You like gay porn,
well, for one, I don't know very many of them.
but you like gay
But
porn.
I've always liked gay porn.
You like gay porn?
Yeah, always.
So, what's the appeal of gay porn to a straight woman?
I can't really articulate it. I never really have been able to. I've thought about it and I think, well, maybe it's because of this or maybe because of this, but ultimately I really don't know.
And do you like men versus women? Gay porn with men.
Yeah, I don't like watching women porn, like gay lesbian porn.
Right, you
that
like
does not appeal to
men
me
with men.
whatsoever. It's
Men
it's
with
men
men.
with
And
men.
that turns you on.
Yes. And so I'll kind of like go through all of their Twitters and I'll look at all their photos and I'll look at all their videos. Some of them I do know, but not well enough to not look at their porn.
And is it because you'd rather not look at people you know? It's hard to find that erotic.
Well,
or?
I don't want to look at people I know because I know them too well. I know their everything about them.
We've
their
talked
quirks,
about that.
I know
We've
their
talked
families,
about that.
I know.
We've
yeah.
talked about that with
It's
you.
like
I don't want to watch.
It is more
porn
difficult to
with you.
objectify people, I think, if you know
Yes.
them.
But isn't that interesting? Because it's not. Is it harder to objectify people in real life if you know them?
Here's the thing: it's not difficult for me to objectify them. It's because it's almost like I'm less interested. I'm like, I'm not. It's not like an uncomfortable thing. It's just I'm not interested.
But I want to go back to that question. Does porn do something for us different than in real life? Because you could objectify someone you know in real life. Right? In real life, if someone got naked in front of you, or if in real life, you would probably be able to do it. But
porn makes it safer. Porn makes it safe, I think. It's safe and it's easy and you can dispose of it easily. But
it's a total fantasy.
It's a total fantasy and it can go anywhere that you'd like it to go.
I think that's a really interesting, and we were going to talk about what porn is, and I was thinking about that, but I think that's a really interesting idea that one of the struggles I think we'll talk about whether porn is it's unhealthy if
Right.
it gets used wrong, but I do think it provides what you're getting at, an outlet for people to have a fun sexual fantasy with no. I don't use the word consequence, but no consequence. Like you said, it's disposable.
No attachment.
No attachment. No responsibility
because there is a lot
for
of attachment, especially when you're even when you are trying to live fantasies with your significant other in like such a safe space. It can still be very difficult.
Right.
An example is like a perfect example is like gangbang. Like that can be very difficult to organize. So it's much easier.
We're going to organize a gangbang tonight at the house. Who's coming over? Who's in?
Before I was in porn,
Have you ever done that?
I haven't organized a gangbang, but I organized like a two-guy with
You
me
did, which
thing,
is more common. People do the
right,
two
but
guy,
even
one
that was a
woman
little,
thing,
a little
or two women, one
challenging.
guy.
That wasn't. So I can't even imagine what it'd be like to organize a gangbang.
But I think even beyond that, I would guess that that even beyond just the effort of doing it, there's something about the fact that it's not real makes it safer to indulge in.
Yeah.
It's sort of like a shooting game, like like teenagers and even adults with video shooting games. You're going through the shooting game and you're shooting and you're killing everyone.
Blood splattered everywhere. You're like, yeah,
it's fun.
of course in real
but
life.
in real life, you really wouldn't want to go into. A tiny percentage of twisted people, but you wouldn't really want to go in and shoot up a bunch of real people.
Right.
You wouldn't want to
And you wouldn't
experience
have
that
the
violence.
same feeling if you were to do that, as you do
Right,
when you're playing the game.
because you'd have a visceral connection to what's really happening.
There's like an entertainment aspect when you're playing the game or when you're watching porn, but in real life, that detachment is gone and it just feels differently because then there's like other things at play, such as
like
empathy.
in real life and real people. But that's what people say is wrong with porn, is that it creates a detachment from what's really going on because you are detached from it, so then you detach in real life from sexual encounters. You dehumanize the real encounters. You're no longer able to make that connection, which is good in terms of violence. You want people to be able to detach. And by the way, people have argued you can't detach in that too. They worried that kids would turn into shooters from that. But I mean, you see what I'm asking? Like, do you think the nature of watching this detached fantasy means for most people when they show up, if they watch it a lot in real life, they'll keep trying to detach?
Here's my theory. I think that it does happen when people watch porn. Not to everybody, but it can happen. But that's because people aren't really educated about what porn is. And that's very different when people watch like violent movies. Most people understand that violent movies, it's a fantasy, it's entertainment, it's not real. They're really able to discern between fantasy and reality when it comes to like violent movies. Whereas in sex or porn, they're not able to because they're never taught about porn. Like they're still learning when they're watching it. They're going, is this real? Am I supposed to be like that? Like they're just still asking so many questions and they don't know really how to navigate it. So there can be some consequences to that. But I think if we are more educated about what porn is, why we use it, how we should use it, people would be able to make that distinction between this is porn, this is fantasy, this is not real. It's entertainment, I enjoy it, but this is real.
So
life.
let's talk about that. What is porn? And it sounds like you would like to have like a curriculum, like a high school curriculum. To take it into the high school. Take it into the high school.
Teacher, Preston.
Let's teach porn.
Well, it's true.
Let's teach porn in every high school in America.
One of the complaints.
The teenagers will love us. We would be huge.
One of the complaints with porn being a public health crisis is that it's so accessible to children or so accessible to the youth, and I don't disagree with that.
But you're saying we need to have understanding.
But if that's the case, instead of cutting it off, because that's a lot more difficult.
It doesn't work.
Than just educating them. That's what we should be doing. We should be saying, hey, youth, if you're learning about sex from porn, here is what porn is. And I'm not saying it has to be like, necessarily in the classroom.
No. We will have
if it's accessible, they need to be taught about.
We will have the only class that is not mandatory that everybody comes to.
That's right.
Everybody would show up. Everyone would show up for our class.
Attendance.
Everyone should show up for the porn class. How to understand porn.
I think it's funny and people would see it as a joke, but I think there'd be some really insightful questions asked, and the kids would probably learn a lot.
Oh,
and they'd ask very serious questions. I think initially it'd be like tee-hee, and then they'd really get into it and learn a lot.
Honestly, over the holidays, I had a conversation with my teenage nephew about porn. And it's interesting. Like, I'm comfortable having those conversations.
Right.
I know, I'm the uncle, whatever. But he was very, he plays hockey and
How
whatever.
old is
like
he?
15,
Okay.
almost 16.
Okay.
And he was like, that's all, like like everybody, all talk about it. The players and and the hockey team, everyone talks about porn. Like they don't, it's sort of like, it's like a cool thing to be like able to talk about it. They all have access to it on devices.
Okay.
But they don't really necessarily understand. They know the names of big porn stars or
Right.
whatever, which to me is interesting. At 15, 16, there's no way I knew that stuff. What I knew, though, is different. I knew we had magazines.
Mm-hmm.
So we had Playboy, Penthouse. The Hustler was like the real edgy
The
thing.
raunchy one.
The raunchy one. But we did the same thing. We got them. We hid the magazines. You hid them under the bed. You hid them in the bar and whatever. Like, you hid the magazines and you looked at them and you got all excited looking at them. You shared them with your friends. Like, look at this. Woo, look at this. And, it was the same thrill and excitement.
Right.
But the difference was it was a still image.
Right.
And you'd look at as many still images as you could. So in a weird way, we were trying to make
animate
video
it?
in our heads.
You're flipping through them really fast so that the
you want to see as
boobs
many
would bounce.
pictures as possible. So I'm sure if you told us, hey, what if we could just watch this? We'd have been like, yeah,
Right.
on our, in our hands. But it was interesting to me because I suggested this idea that, we might do kind of an instructional video for parents and teenagers about how to deal with porn. And he was like, all my friends would watch that.
Well, I
He's like,
had a
everyone would watch it.
conversation.
Thought it was a great idea. So I think teenagers would value insight and information from a source that's not a teacher, mom and dad. I mean, who better than, a porn star to tell them
I had to
about how
talk
watch
to my
porn.
nieces about it because
So how did that go?
Well, they were much younger. I want to say they were probably too young, I think, to know, but they found
know
out
what?
to know that I was in porn. I think it was there's an age where they can't really grasp the idea. Like, it's just.
So explain that. Did they know what you did?
So they knew what I did, but there was a lot of fear. Like, to them, porn was just really bad. It was like this. They were actually afraid for me.
But what
And
did
they
they
were
think you did?
I didn't ask them that specific question.
Did you tell them what you did?
Yeah.
So were you like, I have sex with people on camera?
Yeah, they knew because they'd seen videos
Of you having sex?
Yes.
And knew
And-
it wasn't like your boyfriend?
Right. So I would tell them that. I mean, there were some things that they just weren't able to grasp, and that was mostly BDSM. And I remember I remember
You were showing your nieces that you
I
did
wasn't
BDSM?
showing. No, I wasn't showing them my porn. A friend of theirs had showed them,
And they saw you doing BDSM
yeah, and
porn.
then, so they
saw you being
were-
like tied up and
right. So they were scared.
Yeah.
and they were like,
Gee,
oh
I
my
wonder
God.
why.
And they were like sad for me. And I had to explain to them, and I was like, you may not understand why someone would enjoy this now, but you might in the future. But just know I'm 100% safe, and it's consensual. But as far as BDSM, it was really hard for me to explain that to them at that young of an age. Now they know. I think that once I made it clear to them that I was safe and happy, they were fine. And what actually helped them was when they came to visit me the first time, because they live in Alaska. It really helped them understand that it was a business, because they saw me at home. They saw me with my cats. They were like, oh, Auntie's just her. She's totally normal and like what I thought she was.
And then
It
has
didn't
sex
change
with
her.
people
Yeah,
for-
and so they were like, okay, I get it. Once
And
they
how
saw
do
my
they
life.
look at it now? They're what? How old? 15?
Well, now they're older. They are, gosh, like 16, 17
16,
now?
17. How do they look at it
Well,
now?
now they defend it. Like, if their friends make fun of me to them or something, they're like, it's just a job, okay? And they basically just repeat all
So
the things
I think this
said.
is a representation of both these things with our nieces and nephews, a representation of bigger social issues, because adults have these same questions.
Yeah.
Adults have these questions. Certainly there's the religious aspect, people who religiously think it's not healthy. There is the behavioral social aspect, couples, if one part of a couple doesn't think it's a good idea or thinks it's not, I don't want you watching porn.
Yeah,
If,
that's a big,
that's one.
I think
And so
that's
they
a
have the
big
same
issue.
judgments. And then as a performer, you get those judgments all the time in your life by people. I mean, people judge you, and anyone in the adult entertainment industry, many people judge and say, first, there's something wrong with you.
Right.
You must be a damaged human being. You're dehumanizing yourself. You don't have enough self-worth. Or right, that you're simply not, like, it's just like twisted and bad that
Right.
who would want to do that? Like
But
somehow
that's
it's all
because
negative.
I always say that it's because the person who makes those judgments can't imagine themselves doing it without dehumanizing themselves. Like the only way they would do porn is if they had low self-esteem or whatever. But that's not the case for everybody. But they're imagining themselves in that position. They're going like, they must not have good self-esteem. They must be messed up. They whatever. But that's because they can't imagine themselves doing it.
So
and
talk
feeling
about that.
Empowered.
So talk about that for people who don't know. Are you? Because it's me saying it. Whatever. Are you? You know. Are you?
Am I exploited?
Are you emotionally wounded? Are you emotionally damaged person who then got into this for that reason?
No. And
Are you sure? No.
I've actually even thought about it. I'm like, am I? And I'm like, is there something that happened in my past that has driven me to be in porn? And I mean, I'm open to I've been open to the possibility, and it's just no.
No.
Like I think I joined.
I don't think you are either. You have
you know
emotional
me-
issues, but so I mean,
You
so do
know me
I.
for
I
a
have
long
tons of them, and
time.
I'm not in porn.
But I'm not going to say that the stereotypical damaged woman in porn doesn't exist, because it does. It absolutely does. But it's changing, and it's changed dramatically over the years. And there's more and more legitimacy to the industry, which draws more and more healthy people that want it, that treat this as a real job. This is their livelihood.
Which
they care about it. They're healthy. They care about their career, their safety, like anybody else.
And that makes sense given that we're starting to embrace adult content in our personal lives as a healthy role in our sex lives.
Right. So that.
But before we move on from that, one more about you.
Okay.
So, because I think, again, the stereotype that people are damaged or whatever. Abused as a kid?
No.
Good relationship with your family?
Yeah, I grew up. I wasn't even like hyper religious. I know that sometimes even draws people to that. I had a very normal upbringing. I'm close with my family. I always have been. I still am. It was a little awkward to tell them, but they're okay with it. I think it's very similar to my nieces. They see that I'm safe, and I make good decisions. I have a good head on my shoulders.
No, and you
still.
do. I'm just
I think
saying
if that
for
was
people
18
to know.
and I told them that, they'd be a little more concerned. And 18 is a very young age to get in. It's hard to navigate this industry at such a young age. So I was lucky because I got in a little bit later. I was like 23, 24. So it was a little bit easier for me to navigate.
Let's talk. This is so much to talk about this. We might be doing a second episode on this, but let's talk for a second about that whole side. Because again, there was the August Ames suicide before Christmas, the young porn actress who committed suicide after making the homophobic comments and getting cyberbullied. There was the girl Olivia, who died yesterday.
Yeah, I think it was yesterday.
Yesterday, she was like 20.
Right, there was Yurizon Beltran, which
was last right around Christmas.
Was, I think, a week or
so. There's been like
after
3
August.
porn star.
And before August, there was another.
Right.
Veteran.
Did you know all of them?
I knew all of them except for this most recent.
Olivia.
She was very new.
Right.
It said that she started in March.
And do we know any more about her death? Why? What it was caused by?
No, I don't.
If it was a suicide or not. But one's going to guess it was some. It wasn't
like
natural causes at 20. She wasn't in an accident.
Right. I assume that because if she was
whether suicide or drugs or whatever.
Right.
Right. They were saying the cause of death is So let's talk about that, because there are clearly some people would say, okay, everything you guys are saying is great, except you're ignoring the damage this does to the people who do it and to the people who use it, that there is real damage being done. So you said it's not the idea that the vulnerable person who's broken or wounded gets in this industry. That does happen a lot.
But a lot of times, you're right, and they already are vulnerable and broken, and this industry doesn't help that. I mean, I believe there are some people who feel like the adult film industry saved them in some way. Like they found a place where they belonged. They were able to build a career. But for a lot of people, it's a really difficult industry to navigate, and it kind of exacerbates any sort of like issues that they're dealing with. So it can attract, I hate to say damaged people, but it's true. It can attract that. But it's changing.
So if I were to say, being devil's advocate, and then I want to focus back on me because I have built-in views that I think are not healthy about it still.
Okay.
But if I were to say, yeah, but people make the argument it's inherently. My older niece made this comment to me over the holidays, like that the idea that porn is inherently degrading to women. And you hear that a lot, that the nature of porn is it degrades women. The most porn degrades women. We're going to leave gay porn out of it. The content
degrades women.
That the actors themselves, the performers, are being degraded. And that the
men and the women? Or just the women?
Just the women.
Okay.
And a different argument for men, but it tends. Here we go back to that double standard. Women's sexuality has to be protected. So if you would ask most people, they wouldn't be like men in porn are being degraded. They might be like men in porn are sleazy, but it's the women who are being degraded.
Right.
It's the women in porn who are being abused, taken advantage of, being objectified, humiliated, both in the moment and for thousands and millions or hundreds of people to watch and get off on that humiliation a second time.
Right.
So it not only degrades you, it degrades women in general as men watch that content. And so I think there's two interesting things. One is the notion it doesn't degrade men. We think it degrades women.
We're talking about conventional adult films right now.
Yes.
Like the most conventional, like
Conventional.
boy, girl,
Yeah,
man
pretty much
dominates women.
all porn.
But I think
Well, how do you respond to that? Yeah, pretty much.
Well, it is degrading to women a lot of the time. I'm not going to deny that. It absolutely is. But then that's assuming that women don't want to be degraded ever.
Whoa.
But let me just say.
Okay, no. Let's just go right there. It's assuming that women don't want to be degraded. So let's put it out there. You think women like to be degraded?
People sexualize degradation all the time. It's very common.
You mean in their own lives? You mean in their
sexual
heads?
lives?
In their heads.
It's as a sexual
fantasy. Yeah, not in
fantasy.
porn. You're saying just real people in real life.
Yes, absolutely. Men and women. It's very common. Whether it's like, call me a slut, tell me I'm a hoe, tell me I'm just a streetwalker, and that you want to bring me home and fuck me. Like it's like this whole weird role play where the woman wants to be dominated. And I think it stems from like that natural men are dominant, women are more submissive, and some women hate that and some men hate that. But it's a very like kind of, people are going to get really mad at me for saying this. It's a very natural dynamic. It is. Do you disagree with me? That it's more natural for a man to be dominant and a woman to be not necessarily in their.
What do y'all think?
Not necessarily in their regular life, but in their sexual life.
No, okay.
I'm talking about sexual life. I'm not saying.
I'm holding back because.
But the reason why I was hesitant to say that is because.
No,
I do think that in porn, the trend is to degrade women, and it's also entertainment. So companies are going to exaggerate it and make it like a shock factor as well.
Okay, so
it's just kind of going to build on itself, which is why I think it's just so pervasive that men tend to degrade women in pornography, even though there's plenty of pornography that the dynamic is shifted or completely different.
Excuse me. Let's focus on that question because I think that's the mainstream thing. So what you asked me, what do I think? I actually think two things. I think, yes, in my life experience and most people I know, it is very common for women to have fantasies that we would consider are degrading or in role play to want to play that role. And it's not women who are weak. It's not women who've been abused. I mean, it's totally strong, powerful, self-confident women who, in sexual role play, like to do the things you said. Call me a name, treat me a certain way, da-da-da-da. Some people want to get hurt a little too, spank, whatever it is. But, like, you know, that seems very common. And and I think it's very common for men to have that fantasy as well of wanting to play that role, wanting to do that. What some people argue, so I agree with you.
Especially when socially we expect men to be dominant, and if they're not, well, that's where they're going to want to express it even more, is in their sexual life. If they're not like a real dominant man, but everyone's telling them that they need to be, well, then I can see where they're going to fantasize sexually about being a very strong, dominant man.
So what people have said is, but that makes people make the argument, that's not natural. That's culturally induced. That is a product of a cultural norm of men feeling superior and
What
above
about
women and
men
controlling
being
women.
the pursuers?
Well,
Is
I
that, well, people would argue this, but is that solely cultural as well?
Well, that's the whole issue I think we're getting to. I'm not saying I think it is cultural. I'm saying that's the argument people make. I think we've hit a point where we, as a society, are uncomfortable with gender distinctions.
Right.
Now, that's not saying genders aren't equal. I actually would say, and I know a lot of guys would agree with this, I would say women are the superior gender. I actually have no problem. I'm just saying that to sound good.
Kudos to
No,
you, Rob.
I'm just saying I know a ton of guys who would say it. We'd say women have all the power. They have all the control. They can make us, break us, lead us off the cliff, lead us to success. Like, women have enormous power. They have enormous. Is
that what they call power of the pussy?
Yes, but it's a combination of that with the power of the brain combined, creating and typically a higher emotional empathy and higher emotional IQ often, the ability to, I think, really call the shots. You also are the ones who can bring life into the world. I mean, let's face it, people have joked about a society without men. At some level, we could almost be removed. Yeah.
I'm not going to
lie.
We're pretty
So
cool.
I'm saying that with going back to the idea that I think we are afraid to say there are gender differences. Nobody wants to say men are more, women are less, women are more, men are less in a certain area.
No, I felt uncomfortable saying it just now, even though we've already talked about this.
But I think this is the uncomfortable thing we have to acknowledge.
Right.
We can be equal and different. And different means there are certain things that are more feminine, more attributable to women, and things that are more masculine, more attributable to men in all levels. And I think as a society, we're hitting a point where we don't want to ever say that. We don't want to ever say, we
want to, but we can't.
Well, I think most people feel it, though.
Right.
And so we certainly don't want to say there are predetermined sexual gender roles. Men pursue. Mm-hmm. Men like to dominate. Not always, but I mean, as a rule.
Right, we're not saying always.
Right, no. And not in every situation.
Yeah.
But that in sex, men penetrate. That's a biological reality. Mm-hmm. Now, women have to give the consent for that, or otherwise it's an assault or a rape.
But
receivers. But right there, is a biological role play that's built into our DNA. It's not surprising. Men are bigger generally. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there are guys who like being with bigger women, but as a rule, men are the bigger species. Right. I mean, the bigger gender in the species. Bigger, stronger, built a certain big, designed to be able to take, parts of your body. Well, parts of your body that are most, up here would be most vulnerable for a guy is like a shield.
Look at that tough body, Rob.
Wow.
You can't do that to me.
I know. I can't. And there's a reason I can't.
Well, it would hurt
One, it would hurt you.
It would.
It would hurt you. And it would seem inappropriate. That's not a cultural made-up thing. That's a reality. Cavemen protected the cave women. Went out and hunted, I'm not saying women were like in the back seat.
Well, I'm a big fan of
back.
evolutionary psychology, where a lot of people reject that. But I am a big fan of it. So I'm on your...
So people say cavemen didn't do this. Cavemen and women didn't have gender roles.
They didn't have gender roles. They're saying it was socially constructed. And they're
Even
not
then.
saying it's necessarily in... They're saying it's not necessarily in our DNA. Like it's solely socially constructed.
Right.
The idea of gender and our roles.
And so maybe I'm primitive, but it seems to me you go way back in the cold caves, and you had limited resources. You took the bigger person, the guy, gave him a club, and went, use your testosterone and go out and hunt things down so we can eat and keep things away. You, female, who gave birth to the new life, protect that life, nurture it, keep it alive and grow. And it seems like those were gender roles that seem biological, not cultural. But people might argue now we've shifted to a cultural shift. But I think we haven't. We don't want to. And I think people psychologically rebel against it. I think people don't want to feel like they can't have. And you see it in your people's personal lives all the time. Like, most people, if you strip away it all and sit them down one-on-one alone, they tell you the emotional, honest truth. And it's more likely. I know so many strong, assertive, powerful, creative, smart, successful, financially wealthy women who will say, I do not want a guy who is weaker than me. I do not want a guy who's a pushover.
I'm the
want
same way,
I
because
want a guy
I'm-
who's
if-
strong. I don't need him. I don't need his money. I want someone who matches me or is more in those areas.
I'm similar
very
because
common.
I naturally will. This is not very nice of me, but naturally I'll kind of walk all over people if I can. So if I'm dating someone that doesn't stand up to me and say, "Stop it, you're not being nice," then I'm like, I'll just walk all over them, bulldoze right over them and their opinions.
Swat them like a fly.
So I need someone to be like, "Cut it out," and then I'm like,
But do you also like someone who then takes control in sex?
"Yeah, I do." I tend to veer towards the submissive side sexually. I like to explore.
So in your personal life, you want your boyfriend to step up, and you don't want him to lay
like
back
that's
and,
not. I've never. Maybe once I got into porn, I did kind of for fun fantasize about being dominant, but I don't naturally veer towards fantasizing about being dominant over men. I enjoy it. It's fun for me, and if a guy likes it, then I'm all for it. But that's not what I gravitate towards. I definitely gravitate towards being submissive, but I'm not in my personal life, as you know. So I'm certainly the stereotype of like strong women that's like submissive and are sexual.
But I don't think that's that weird.
No, that's why I said it's kind of a stereotype now.
So I think we're getting back to that notion that I don't know that because porn tends to. I think porn. This is the second part of what we were talking about before. That I was saying, there's two things. I think that's common, that idea of men having the fantasy of dominating women being dominated. I also think porn reflects what people want. It's a supply and demand. It's an entertainment thing, right? The reason most porn is what it is not because it's making people feel that way. It's because that's what people want to watch. Isn't that right?
Yeah, but I agree to a point, but I kind of disagree too.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, because I had this conversation with you one time, remember, in Starbucks, and I was like, we decide what people want. We can decide. No,
Who's we?
You and I.
Oh, you and I.
No, but I think people use that argument a lot, especially when people criticize the content in porn, like it's degrading to women and whatever. People are like, it's a supply and demand, and that's true to an extent, but also there's been a lot of trends in porn that have come out recently that people didn't realize they wanted because it's not what they naturally gravitated towards, but they saw it and they were like, whoa, this is hot. This is totally new to me.
So wait,
because it's almost like
okay, hold on, let me explore that. Question.
Okay.
So you're saying you think that to some extent you, the industry, is shaping what people want to watch.
I do. I'm not saying completely, but yes. And you know, I've asked myself this. I'm like, gosh, how do I feel about that? How do I feel about being in an industry that viewers sometimes do have trouble navigating, and there are consequences.
Okay.
And I'm like, how do I feel about that? And it's not and then ultimately I conclude that it's not necessarily the industry. It's not that we should get rid of the industry. It's that people need to learn how to navigate the porn industry.
Which
better.
I want to talk about in a second. I know you
not
do too.
Not the porn industry, but
no,
pure porn viewing.
Itself, porn viewing.
Yeah.
But last question on that. But see, I resist that notion a little. I get that our taste can be shaped, but like if I watch something and it's not
but I do
appealing
believe in
to me,
supply
I don't
and demand.
watch it anymore. I'm like, oh,
I know, but
that doesn't turn me on as much as that does. It doesn't. I'm saying,
right.
You show me 3 different options. I pick the one that my psyche feels most drawn to.
Right. And I do think people demand this. People want this. I'm not saying they don't, but I am saying there's a degree where we can shape what people want as well.
Okay.
But I think that's in like a lot of markets. That's not purely supply and demand.
Right. Well, no, but I'm just saying, again, I think because these are sensitive cultural issues, especially now, I think people would argue the whole idea of men being often in control, the whole Me Too movement, the whole idea that women being inappropriately treated sexually by men in the workplace and outside the workplace. Some people would argue porn encourages that.
Well, here's another thing. I think that various types of porn are not easily accessible to people because a lot of people consume porn through tube sites right now, such as, Pornhub, and they go on there and they just search stuff. And I think a lot of the content is that whole mainstream man is dominant, woman is submissive. And it's hard to find what you really want. It's not easy, and not everybody wants to invest a lot of time into trying to find the porn that they want. And so I think that is predominantly what's out there when you're not trying that hard to find the porn that you want. And so maybe it does shape how people think relationships should be or sexual relationships should be. But then why don't we instead make it easier to access all different types of porn by having a conversation about it?
So
By opening up that dialogue.
So what does that look like? All different kinds of porn. How do we make it easier? Porn's so accessible now. I mean, it's everywhere. That's an issue people have. It's everywhere.
Yeah, but if you go on to the places where people are mostly consuming porn, it's hard to find that, I'm going to say boutique content.
Boutique porn.
Boutique
The upscale boutique porn.
But also
for the connoisseur, you want boutique.
Now,
wait, what does boutique porn mean?
I'm saying just
what is boutique porn? What does that mean?
Not necessarily
Give
like,
me an example. What's boutique porn?
Okay, a boutique porn would be I want to see women who look more realistic with maybe, or like I want to see handicapped women in sexual relationships. I know one company that portrays handicapped porn, but not as like they're not
fetish,
distorting it. It's not
fetish.
a fetish. It's just saying like this. They portray it in a very realistic way. Like if somebody, is in a wheelchair or whatever, this is really how it happens. So that's very, that's a very small niche. But that's just an example.
So that's one side of it. But at the same time, I would argue part of our attraction to porn is that it represents what isn't real.
That's true.
You don't. I know there are some exceptions.
That was just an example,
I know,
though.
but I'm saying I know some exceptions. But for the most part, I don't think what you watch in a fantasy adult thing is something you want to have in real life.
Real life is boring for people to sexualize because you.
No, but you're right. But
day.
use like the gangbang example.
Right.
Anyone who has a fantasy about being gangbanged, and it's a pretty common female fantasy, right? Some version of rape and gangbang is very common.
It is very common.
As a fantasy. Yep. And it's a common male fantasy to be part of it. Mm-hmm. But I think in most 95% of those cases, the people don't really want to experience that in real life, or do it in real life, on either side of it. It's a
now
it's
the
fantasy.
New trend is ethically produced porn. Have you heard this?
I have not, but that's hysterical. Just to
it's
farm fed.
It's ethical porn or even
organic
feminist porn. I don't necessarily like the term feminist porn because it implies that feminists only like one type of porn. Women can like all types of porn. They can like porn that degrades women. They can like porn that in its content would not be considered feminist. But ethical porn, people are trying to find ways to consume porn ethically because they're worried that.
What does that even mean, though? What is ethical porn consumption?
So you watch a porn and you ask yourself, do these women really want to do this? Is this really consensual? I don't know. Oh my gosh, I'm asking all these questions. It's making me uncomfortable. I can't really enjoy this porn because I don't know if this is really consensual. It looks very realistic and like she doesn't want it. It's really hard for me to like sexualize this porn because I don't know. So, I mean, people don't do that when they watch mainstream movies. They're not like, oh my God, is Angelina Jolie really hurt?
That's true.
Oh my God,
they
I
don't
can't even
do
concentrate. But they do it in porn.
Do it.
And so ethically produced porn is basically, I think, pornography that is created with informed performers and it's consensual. So the performer is not, because sometimes in porn there's going to be cases where there is like some coercion there or misinformation. Like you get to set and they're like, oh, we told you it's going to be this, but it's actually this. Like that's not being an informed performer.
Right.
And so being an informed performer and making the consensual choice to be involved in the product, it has nothing to do with the content. That's what people that's the confusing thing is it has nothing to do, I think, with the content itself because you can produce ethical porn and have the content be inherently unethical.
Look, the whole notion I get it, and maybe it's a good thing. A part of me laughs.
You hate it.
No, well, part of me laughs. It's the whole, I grew up, with a farm, the whole thing, like everything was organic. Now, we didn't call it organic. It was just the way things were raised and, it was all natural. Now it's like, everything has a label on it. There's an ethical, organic, sustainable way to do everything. I think it's sort of funny that we now have ethical porn. But there's just something kind of funny about that notion. Not there's anything wrong with it. It's just funny, the whole notion. But that also
it's kind
shows
of like
you
being, USDA approved. It's sort of like any porn.
it's a little PC, is what it is.
But now
it's a little
used
PC.
as a marketing
it's a little
tool.
PC.
It's
But there's
kinda
nothing
used as a
wrong with it.
marketing tool
But
now.
here's a question that you made me think about. Why is it that people don't do that in regular movies? You
because
don't
they
wonder
can't
if the
discern between
person's being
fantasy and reality
tortured.
and pornography. That's what
But in
that
a
goes
movie,
back
in
to
a
what we
really
were
well-made
saying.
movie, you see people being blown up, and you may cringe and cry and feel bad. You don't actually think the actor's getting killed. Even in that moment, you feel for them as if they are.
There is obviously it's a very open out in the violence is very out.
No,
in the
okay,
open.
whatever it
Mainstream
is,
entertainment is
whatever
very
it
out
is.
in the open. We've been socialized from a very young age to know that entertainment movies, it's a fantasy essentially.
But I'm making
It's entertainment, but
No.
in porn we're not taught that, so
Okay.
people don't know.
So we need to be, because I want to go back to that point. It's not that people don't have reactions to mainstream content. If you saw somebody in a movie being somehow brutalized, you saw somebody
Right, but
being
when they
raped,
walk
if you saw
away, they're
somebody being
okay.
raped, you would cringe. You might cringe and cry and get angry for all those emotions, but you
Right.
don't actually think it's happening to the actor.
Right.
This doesn't mean you're not affected by the story and in it. But with porn, people wonder, is it actually happening to the actor?
Right.
Why? Why do we have that distinction?
Well, because there's assumptions about pornography in the first place that we are all exploited.
Is that all it is?
coerced,
Is that all it is? Is it just assumptions?
That
or is there
is the
something
narrative
inherently
around
about
porn, I think, that
or
people
is
are
it-
grow
Okay.
up with from
Or-
the beginning.
okay.
There's nobody going. That is the
Okay.
most common perception of pornography.
Okay.
I think.
And it might be true. Or
Growing up.
is it also that we have so deeply conflicted view around something that is purely sex oriented that we can't separate? Some part of our psyches
I
gets
think
caught
we
up in
can
confusion. No, I
separate
don't mean
if we-
are incapable, but we haven't learned how.
No, we
don't know
haven't
how.
learned how, but that's what I'm saying is we can learn how. But it has to be more deliberate now because it's sort of like in passing as you're growing up with as far as the mainstream entertainment goes. But now with porn, we don't really learn about it in passing. Now it has to be like a very deliberate action
See, I think
to
there's
teach people about what porn is.
I think there's I'm not disagreeing, but I think there's a deep-seated conflict we have around all things sex in our culture, in America.
But do you think that's
We have a conflict. We have a guilt, a shame, and I think there is an inherent shame attached to a lot of things around sex.
Okay, but
and porn becomes that. I still, from my childhood, still carry a certain amount of shame around. Even though I may watch porn, there's a part of me that feels shameful.
Yeah, but that's because you were socialized to feel shameful.
I know.
It's not because it's inherently.
No. Oh, no, I'm not saying the content is. I'm saying as a society, we are so both hypersexualized and hyper-repressed.
Right, but that's because of the way that we're socialized.
No,
so
I am agreeing.
Okay,
I'm agreeing.
If you were to replace mainstream entertainment with porn and do everything exactly the way that we approach mainstream entertainment, do you feel like most people would still be in conflict?
Yes. Because
most,
I think
most people.
that's
so
what I'm trying to say.
you're saying it's like you're almost saying it's just biological.
No.
Like it's natural. Like
No. I'm saying because we have created this shame around it that goes way deeper.
But I'm saying if you replaced mainstream entertainment with porn, you just stuck porn right in there and you treated it the same way as we treat mainstream entertainment. We're socialized the same way. We're not socialized the way that we currently are with porn. Do you think there'd be conflict?
Yes, because I think the conflict is a deeper. Yeah, theoretically no, but I think the conflict is a deeper thing. It's why people aren't comfortable with their fantasies. We have a deep conflict with about our own sexual psyches as people. And religions may enhance that or push that more, or how you were raised, or
But
certain
do you
cultural
think that
norms.
could be different if we weren't? Okay, so you're saying we have this deep, innate shame around
I don't know if it's
sexuality.
innate, but it's there. I don't know that it's innate,
Well,
but
if it's not innate, then
I'm not saying
it
it's
can be
biological.
different.
Yeah, okay, it
It
could
can-
be different, but I'm trying to make the point that I'm trying to make a point for viewers that I think we don't even realize how much, even people who say porn is great, I love porn. I think we have an extra layer. People would be like, I love porn. I know a lot of people would be like, I watch porn. Sure, porn's great. Men, women, yeah, it's great. Great. Would you date a porn star? You know? Would you bring a porn star home to your family?
That's based on how it is now.
I know, but what I'm saying is even people who think they don't have an issue, I think as a society we are so hyper repressed and hyper sexualized that we get in conflict with ourselves.
Right.
And carry that into how we look at it. So yes, is that something I agree with you we have to change, but I don't know if the change, I don't even know how you go about changing it, because first people have to realize they're carrying this double standard. Like inherently porn is still kind of, everyone does it. Most everyone. And it's still kind of like bad. Like,
well, yeah, I mean, that's shown in how people treat sex addiction. And
what do you mean?
Well, because there's a lot, like there's like kind of two sides right now. There's the people that believe in sex addiction, that porn or sex can like cause this addiction, and other people are saying no, it's not. Sex addiction isn't caused from sex or pornography. There's usually underlying issues there, and it manifests in the form of like sex addiction or porn addiction. And ultimately it's a behavioral addiction. So you can be addicted to food, you can be addicted to exercise, and people don't look at exercise and demonize exercising. We should stop exercising because people are becoming addicted to it. So something is wrong with exercising. They're like applying different rules to sex addiction. Because like what you're saying is it's like this inherently wrong thing.
We have a complicated, deep, long historical conflict with our sexuality.
Right.
And whether it's repressing it in women, unleashing, not in men, but I mean, even with men, I think there's a lot of shame and confusion around sex in general. Well, partly why I wanted to do this show, why it emerges in such crazy ways and such bad behaviors. I think that's what you're getting at. Like if we would change that, if we would start healing that, we'd be actually grow.
Sometimes awareness does so much in the process of healing. I feel weird saying the word healing, like we're all of a sudden in this like self-care episode. But it's true. Like just being aware of how you can use porn and how it's affecting you makes a big difference. Some people don't know. Some people blame porn. Some people are like, oh, this porn's bad, I need to get out of it. But sometimes it's not the porn. Maybe something's wrong with you. I don't mean to sound like that, but it's kind of
right.
True. Why are you addicted to exercise? Why are you addicted to food? Why are you addicted to anything?
Right. I always like to say we're addicted to breathing. People are like, that's not an addiction. But if it is. If I stop you from breathing, you will die, but you will do anything to breathe.
That's just a biological reaction.
And so is sex a biological reaction.
That's true.
It's a biological. It's actually next to breathing, DNA-wise, procreation, sex has got to be the single biggest thing. Yep. It's what keeps the species alive.
Right.
I mean, in all species. So I'd put it right up there with breathing. Breathing and sex. Can't live without them. But we try,
and sex,
but we don't practice not breathing. We try to practice not having sex,
right,
or not being too indulgent in it. Look, I have so much repressed stuff around it. It's crazy, and I'm aware of that. But I think a lot of people do. You know. So here's a personal question for you. How would you have you done things in porn that you wish you'd never done because you wouldn't want people to see them? Do you have any shame about people seeing stuff you did?
Yeah, it's not. I don't want to say shame. It's more just like embarrassing.
Like what?
I'm like, man, sometimes I put a camera in my butthole one time. Oh my God. And it's not like I'm shamed. Like, oh my God, I have this deep seated shame. It's like, I feel so horrible about myself. It's more like if you trip and fall and you're like, oh my God.
Wait.
I can't believe I did that.
Wait.
And it's almost comical to me.
Camera in the butthole, tripping and falling. Like, not sure they're exactly the same.
No, but I'm trying to describe the embarrassment aspect, like as the level of embarrassment.
Right, you felt embarrassed. Where it wasn't,
like,
I get
when
it.
you trip and fall,
you're
it's
embarrassed.
Not shameful.
You're embarrassed. Like, oh, what a fool. I just tripped
It's more
and fell.
like,
I'm an idiot.
And
I'm clumsy.
Also, here's the thing. I do a lot of things in porn that I think are just absurd and ridiculous, but I do it because it's my job. I mean, if something made me truly uncomfortable, I wouldn't do it.
Right.
But it's not stuff that makes me uncomfortable. I'm just like, this is so stupid. And I can't believe people think this is sexy, and it's just me being a crab. But I've eaten cereal out of a girl's butthole one time. And I make
You got
fun
a lot
of it.
butthole things.
I do.
A lot of butthole things.
I do so many things, and sometimes I come
Where does
home
that come from?
and I think, this is so stupid. I can't believe people are doing this. But again, it's
Wait,
not shame.
let me go back to the butthole things. Where does the butthole fascination come from? Things
it's
being
the
stuck up
no-no
people's
area.
butts. Is that why? No, I mean, why people? Obviously,
It's
people.
a dirty area,
people
and people like that.
People have a lot of obsession with things being stuck up butts.
Absolutely.
Other than
People love
penises.
the sphincter. They love the sphincter. It's tight. It's like
is it because it's the no-nos? No.
I call it the no-no zone.
And that's why people like it.
I don't know.
I mean, clearly it's a fetish thing
big
people
time.
like.
I mean,
lot.
people want to sometimes just zoom in on the butthole and just look at it, and just that's it. They don't want to have anything connected to it. I mean, there's a lot of directors that I work for that like focus on the butthole. It's all about the butthole. They do like acrobatic things with your butthole. Like, how big can it get? What kinds of things can you stick in and push out? What kind of weird noises come out of there? Like, they're just fascinated with it.
And is that also, though, not connected to the idea that is a humiliating thing for a woman to have to do?
I think sometimes, but I don't know entirely, because I know a lot of butthole fans, and it doesn't feel like their attraction is to that it's degrading.
The butthole. It's the fascination with the butthole.
It's just something about that hole.
Okay, next question. This is the other one. It was tied to the first one. How would you feel if one of your nieces, or if you had a daughter and wanted to do porn?
I would be concerned, but I actually hate this. No, listen, stop! Don't interrupt me.
All right.
I would be concerned. But that's because it is a difficult industry to navigate, and a lot of people don't make it. So while I've had very positive experiences, I would be worried that she wouldn't. So, but it doesn't mean just because I'm concerned about my daughter joining porn doesn't mean that it's just this bad thing. It's just because it's not. I'd want to make sure she was doing it for the right reasons. Sometimes people do it for attention, and if that's the case, then they end up getting like wrapped into all kinds of making poor choices. And so it would concern me. I'm not going to lie, but that doesn't mean I regret my decision or think that the porn industry is bad.
Right. No, I think that's fair.
It's just a
there's a
challenging
little do what I
industry
say,
to
not what I
navigate.
do, but I get it. I think those parameters are.
But I hate that people assume that because I would be concerned, they're like, oh, well, there you go. You shouldn't be doing it.
Do you ever feel, be honest, do you ever feel questions about shame about what we've been talking about? Even if you think you shouldn't. The way I talk about having shame around certain things around sex that I know, why do I have that? It's where it came from. Do you ever, late at night, whatever, just sometimes go, am I like just a messed up person for doing this? Like, you know.
Well, it's crossed my mind, but it's crossed my mind because people bring it up.
I understand.
So I entertain that idea,
from.
and I think, should I feel shame? But I don't think I do feel
You've
shame.
never felt any guilt, shame, other than questioning it, like, should I? No, I don't. Like, actually, where you go, I do and I shouldn't.
I'll be honest. I don't know if I have.
Okay.
I think that's why I
was
unusual, so
though,
easily
right?
able to do
That's
it.
unusual,
I think it's
right?
unusual. Yeah, I think it is unusual.
Most people in your industry probably have at times
But
questioned.
I think it's also that a lot of people in the industry have this natural ability to they either just are detached from sex naturally, or they are capable of detaching from sex. So I think when you're more attached to sex emotionally, maybe you feel more of that shame. Maybe because I know there is a lot of performers that do feel shame and still do it. They're not able to really detach.
How interesting that so many performers detach from sex to do it for performance, and yet as viewers, consumers, we're doing the opposite. We're
It is weird.
I mean, we may be detaching in that it's a fantasy, but we're going in all out. Like, whoa, we're attaching totally to the point where, like, totally, we're getting a total sexual experience out of it. And you guys are making it completely detaching from it.
Yeah, well, I feel like, it's not everybody does, but
a lot.
A lot of people do, I think. I think.
Yeah, and you guys will do something, and then you'll all sit around and talk afterward as if, like, having coffee.
Right, like earlier when I was like, I hate it when people just assume women can squirt.
Right. You were saying
mad.
it's a funny story, right? Yes,
And they
because
book
someone
me for
wanted you to,
stuff,
and they're like, well, right. You're like, I can't squirt.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean,
But you're right. We do think like I could sit around and talk to the girl who I ate cereal out of her butthole and laugh about
or
it.
a
Be
guy
like, oh my God, can you believe I did
who
that?
dominated you, and
Right.
then afterward you're like, oh, how was your morning?
Yeah, I'm working with someone in a couple weeks, and he was texting me. He's like, I'm so excited because I'm dominating him. He's like a lifestyle submissive, and he's like, I'm so excited, and we're like, yeah. Well, what do you want to do? Well, like
It's like a play date.
yeah.
Okay, so this has been fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope it was informative.
Right, and I think there's more to cover, but I feel like we've got a good amount for a first episode on porn. And maybe people have questions. Maybe people want to let us know. You can find us at a number of ways. sexthingshow.com is our site, and you can get access to all our content there. Mm-hmm. We got everything up there now, right?
Yeah, we have all our videos on there. Well, we have our most recent video on there, but then you can go click on the links for YouTube, which have the rest of our podcasts. You can go to iTunes, Google, Stitcher.
And we obviously want you to follow us on Instagram.
At Sex Think Show.
At Sex Think Show. So any of that. And I'd love to hear what people would like. I think there's more to cover on this.
Yeah, I always want to hear from people because, I mean, especially for me, I come from an interesting perspective, so I don't always know what outsiders, I guess you would say, are thinking about or what questions they want answered.
And I think in general, right now, we're at a cultural changing point around a lot of things, and a lot of it is around gender and sexuality. And, and I feel like now more than ever, like we can't have these conversations censored. And people need to start challenging and thinking about stuff. They really do. Like, it's so easy to throw porn under the bus.
Right.
Even though so many people watch it. I've said this to you before. It drives technology. Every major technology, VHS, beta to VHS, whatever, video, every technology, porn sort of drives it. Like, for those who don't know, beta kind of died because people were using VHS for porn. Like, it's so there and present, and yet we still have a shame factor, a massive shame factor to it. And I think that underlies a shame factor we have around a lot of things with sex. And I feel like we got to have those conversations, or we're going to just say stuck.
We are.
Right?
Let's have uncensored conversations, Rob. Even though censorship is very cool right now.
We want the uncensored conversations. We're going to try to
People love censorship right now.
Right. We're going to just say what...
We don't.
No, we don't. It's hard, though. Before we come, I'm just going to say, it's hard sometimes to say stuff.
I know, because even earlier when I said things, I was like, ugh, because I know that it's
we're getting affected by it. Like, you almost want to censor yourself. You're like, oh, geez.
Because you know the reaction. You've seen it happen. You've watched people just, like...
And it's, get
attacked.
Yeah, and I used to be more...
Not very...
much.
Yeah.
And I used to be more willing. But I hear people privately say this stuff to me all the time.
Yeah.
People be like, oh, and they're terrified to say it in public. So this is a way to start having that conversation. And we may take some heat for it. You already have.
I already have.
I have too, Yeah.
Well.
So it goes. All right. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.